what we need to do is look at what we can do to extend these resources, what we can do to our advantage, and we can disperse food yield over time. What our present system does is rely on everything being marketed en masse on one day. So we've got mass yield in the present system. Agriculture is specialised in very large crops, singular elements, all ripe ideally on one day, or in the smallest amount of time possible, so it all gets to market at once. And we're actually aiming in the opposite direction. So you're looking at elements now to extend yield. So you want a dispersal of yield over time. You'd ideally like to plant on one day and harvest over many, many days or weeks. You'd actually prefer a lack of uniform crop. You'd like it to be coming ripe at different times. You'd like an extension of yield. So you can go early, mid, and late varieties. If you're planting one species, let's say we want to plant a particular fruit tree. Avocados would be a good example. Here, you can plant an avocado, all one variety, get them all ripe at the same time, then there's only one time a year you're going to eat avocados in that region or on that property. But there are 3 varieties usually in any one region that will extend avocado yield over 9 months. So you can eat avocados for 9 months, but you've got to plan mid, early and late ripening avocados. You can do exactly the same with oranges. You can extend oranges over approximately 9 months. Usually you've got Navel is one of the first oranges that are ripe in a year, the variety Navel. Then Joppa is a mid-season orange, and Valencias will stay on the tree for a long time. And if you have enough Valencias, you can still have fresh oranges 9 months after you harvested your first Navel. So you've extended the yield just by doing that. And that can, all the way through all your crops and all your productive elements, you're looking to extend by choosing variety. I find some things there is a little bit of extension, but if you're talking annual crops, they're limited by your climate. I can harvest watermelons in midsummer, and it's round about Midsummer's Day, or a little bit earlier maybe, I can get my first watermelon. And everybody's very excited. Wow, you got a watermelon. Wow, look, you know, it's a great thing. You got a watermelon, right? And everyone's really happy to eat the first watermelon, and it's such a treat. And it is for a little while. It's not so long because we're used to just having everything from the supermarket whenever we want, from wherever we want. We don't think about where it's come from or if it's in or out of season, because that's just what we got used to. But this is actually a fresh organic watermelon. It's something really special. A few weeks later, we're getting watermelons every day. It's like, oh yeah, another watermelon. You know, yeah, great, you know, fine. It goes somewhere around the autumn equinox. And a week or two later, our last watermelon comes in. That's about a 3-month period. Halfway between, from midsummer, halfway to midwinter, maybe a week or two either side you can get it, and you're coming down to the last watermelon you can pull in. and you come in with the last watermelon, and nobody pays a lot of attention quite often. Say, this is the last watermelon. Oh yeah. And you finish off the last watermelon, and then it doesn't take long before someone says, what happened to the watermelons? So they're finished. This is the time of year when they finish. We haven't got any more watermelons. Oh, we really missed the watermelons. It really didn't take very long before people miss it, and they said, why can't we have them? We just can't have them because they're not in season. And we've really got used to everything being available whenever we want. And with that comes no responsibility. I mean, there are ways maybe you could extend watermelon as a product. You might be able to make some kind of preserve, or you might be able to extend it as a ferment. You might be able to turn it into a vinegar or a watermelon wine or something. And some crops you can extend because of that, but that's it. You're in season. It's an annual. And there aren't varieties of watermelon that extend out of that season. And there's a certain point of time when you've got to plant them, and you can get them a little bit earlier if you're lucky, or you've got a greenhouse or something. Maybe you can work it out just a little bit. There's a limit to that, and there's a limit to where they ripen, and that's it. So you've got to look at something to replace your watermelons. So that could be early and late ripening. So we've got something like a glass house or a polytunnel where we can get germination early because we've got a little bit extra heat. And maybe we can have a late ripening situation where we have some thermal mass heat gain that extends the temperature a bit longer. Because now that's a seedling at this end, but this is a mature vine at this end. This is a mature watermelon. You can't just sit it in a you can't start it over here in midsummer in the glass house and expect it a full-grown watermelon. It's a waste of space anyway. But can you fit a position in where it's a late ripening situation? We can ripen it a little bit later. You can extend it a little bit, and then that's it. You can't go any further. We can increase diversity generally, though. So a general increase in diversity, other elements that replace your fruit trees, other productions, other crops that replace your watermelon. You're then looking at food value. What is the value of that food? What is it it's actually giving you? Is it a fruit? Is it a main carbohydrate? Is it a starch crop? What is it? Is it a protein? Are there other elements that give me that same food value? So diversity can extend that same food value for you. Leaf crop, root crop, seed crop, fruit, all these different elements are all different product yields. There could be food value that you could be shared across all those different crops. Then storage. And question mark, how does that then store? There's not much of a way to store a watermelon. There's a little bit of storage time, but not a lot. But there are some pumpkins and squashes that store for a long time. At a certain point in your planning schedule or planning of trees, you're looking at how can I store it? How can I store it, and how can I process it if I have surplus? And this is particularly valuable where you have a dormant time of the year. If you've got a cold climate, then you definitely have to go through a storage period of food. And you're looking at then processing, can I process that food to have a higher food value as well as storage? And you often can. You can go in fermentation systems that increase the nutrient value of the food. And often bring up the value because you've processed it to increase value. So you can dry it, and you can pit it, and you can cold storage some. There is some advantage to being in a cold climate, that it's easy to make a chilled storage system. And as you get to the tropics, it's very hard. It's very hard to dry anything in the humid tropics, almost impossible in the wet tropics to dry fruit because you're at 80% humidity. But you don't really have to because everything's available regularly in the ground, that nothing stops growing. In fact, in the tropics, often you don't need a food cupboard. It's called a garden. It's in the ground. And it's often root storage and it's often perennial. It hasn't got a season. It'll grow for quite a few years and it will still have product. So you're linked towards perennial food. We've absolutely got fixated with annual food because a lot of that is extended out of the cool climates. Well, a lot of places in the world you don't need a lot of annual food. You can do most of it with perennials. In fact, in the cold climates there's even a lot of perennial food. And there's more and more research in permaculture systems where people are riding up on cool to cold climate perennial food that just keeps growing. And there isn't really a season. Agriculturally, that's a disadvantage. So in agriculture, what has generally happened is we've perennialized agriculture, but agriculture has annualized our perennial food. So we've taken crops like onions. A lot of the original onions are perennial clumpers. You can plant a clumping onion, like a Chinese clumping onion. You can plant one onion, and 8 months later, you've got 50 little clumping onions in a clump. But the selection for agriculture has gone in the other direction. It's gone towards annual convenience for harvest and mass yield of singular elements. And because of that lack of stability, also all the other outside elements that have to go in, fertilizer and biocides and lots of mechanical advantage, but all at a cost. So if you're looking at extending yield at your convenience, you're looking the other way. You're looking at perennializing annuals. If you find standard annuals that have some perennial form, you lean in permaculture towards those perennial systems. Sugarcane is a classic. Sugarcane is a perennial clumping cane. But by convenience, it's been turned into a massive agricultural system and included in all kinds of foods, but grown more or less like an annual or a biannual. It's grown for 1 or 2 years and then removed from the field and planted again. But in traditional systems, you just have a few clumps of sugarcane in your garden and you continuously cut from it. So to our disadvantage, we don't actually look at how we can take up this concept and theme of design and make it easier for us. From a garden, from a food, from a local community point of view, we need to eat all the time, every day. So you want fresh food every day. You've got to have a great diversity of yield over time. You've got to disperse the yield over time as far as possible and understand that this identifies your community. And we can do it better now than ever before. We can do this much better than we've ever been able to do it because we have the diversity available to us. There are crops that a lot of people don't generally in the supermarket don't understand. They don't know what they are. They wouldn't know what Brazilian spinach is. It's a perennial spinach. It keeps growing. Antheria sisu. Yacon, sweet root, is a wonderful perennial crop and makes a sugar syrup that doesn't affect diabetics. Yacon, so sweet root, and it grows a root crop below a a crown, and the crown can be divided. It goes dormant in winter, grows up as a small sunflower family plant, and each year it produces great big clumps of roots underneath, but the roots are what you eat, and you can eat it raw as a very sweet celery apple type flavor and very juicy. But it's the crown at the top of the plant that you extend. So you can get many, many divisions from one crown. Ever so easy to extend. Sweet potato is a perennial. It'll keep growing and growing. And you can extend it by the vine or the root. And yet we grow it as an annual. We grow it like an annual with mechanized monoculture harvest. There's lots and lots of ways that we can look at that and say, well, that makes it a lot easier to grow our food and is convenient all the time and is something that we can absolutely rely on.